Hey everyone. So before the review, I just want to give a message to you all. I'm gonna try and go off the cuff just because I just want to, just be open and all that stuff. So I am very aware that I am not the first person to review the Fazbear Frights books. I'm aware that I'm a few years late to this train. I know that there have been other reviewers, YouTubers, content creators who have reviewed these books. They probably have similar things to say, probably have different things to say. They definitely have a lot more views and a lot more engagement, but compared to me. But at the same time, my reviews still, even though they don't have as many views, still get a lot of engagement, and they get a lot of the same commenters, and the like ratio to the view ratio is very consistent and very good. So I really just have to thank all of you, because all of you are watching these videos are just encouraging me to push forward. The fact you all keep coming back, and the fact that I'm still getting views, and the fact that I'm seeing a lot of the same of you in the comment section just tells me that you value my content, the way I convey information, and the actual information I convey. It seems valuable to you. You want to take time out of your day to watch me go through this because reading these books is a journey for me. This is the first time I'm reading them, and it may be 2023, but you all still seem to want to tag along for my journey, and I am just so grateful and humbled for that. So thank all of you. Seriously, I am so blessed, really. There's a lot of cool stuff coming up in the future too. I mean, I have so much more planned for this channel. Some of it related to FNAF, others not related to FNAF, but I'm not stopping now. There's no reason to stop. This is how foundations are built. So that felt good. Thank you all. Anyway, on to the review. Our first story, Bunny Call, stars a put-upon dad named Bob who just wants to fish. Already I like this guy. But he can't do that. He can't go fishing because he's on a family vacation with his wife and kids to some family-oriented campground, and there's a whole bunch of activities that his wife signed up their family for. He's not looking forward to them. He's annoyed. He can't fish. I mean, a real Greek tragedy. So in an act of petty payback, he secretly signs up his family for the Bunny Call, where this mascot rabbit character named Ralpho will wake up their family at 6 a.m. in the morning, I think, with a whole bunch of cymbals crashing. And as that time looms nearer, Bob starts to regret his decision, but the bunny may show up after all. Remember what I said about previous stories having no connection to Five Nights at Freddy's? I think this is the first one that has 0 references to Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't think the words Faz or Bear are even in this story, but that's only part of it. Otherwise, this one was pretty substandard. Bob's character, just unpleasant, and while his wife and kids are also annoying, it almost seems like they were designed to be annoying. In other words, the character seemed inorganic, more excuses to justify the plot going forward the way it did, rather than real people with believable interactions. The best scene in this story is when Bob meets up with that other dad who also signed up his family for the Bunny Call, and they both talk about how important their families are to them, and they both slowly come to the realization that maybe having a giant robot rabbit come to wake up their families at 6 in the morning is a bad idea. That was a good scene. That was really sweet. When the Rabbot shows up, Ralpho, is that his name? Yeah, that whole sequence, kind of stretched and repetitive, although I did like the detail where he's trying to reach his paw through the window and Bob smashes it and the paw starts bleeding all over him. That was a pretty gnarly detail. I like that too. The ending though, I mean, Bob manages to hold off Ralpho until 6 a.m. and he, wait, I literally just realized that holding off the thing until 6 a.m. is a reference to Five Nights at Freddy's. Damn it! That was unscripted. I'm not even kidding. I just completely off the cuff. Wow. Anyway, let's do that again. Bob holds off the animate... I can't even do this anymore. Wow. Bob holds off Ralpho until 6 a.m. And then he undergoes this like Scrooge-like metamorphosis where he starts to appreciate, you know, the value of life and the love of his family and all that. All that's cheesy and wholesome. I mean, I enjoyed it. But then, during the end, one of the counselors stands up during the breakfast and says that he regrets that they couldn't do the bunny call because the guy who usually dresses up as Ralpho was sick. Dun dun dun! That's one of those endings that the reader just cannot take seriously because all it makes you think is dun dun dun! Hey Steve, I saw Randy at the diner the other day. He says to say hi. But Dave, Randy's been dead for 30 years. Dun dun dun! But seriously, I wasn't a huge fan of Bunny Call. I mean, it was kind of goofy. There were a few highlights, but I wouldn't call it anything high tier. Next. So, this is the one y'all warned me about. Even before I decided I'd start reviewing the Fazbear Frights books. You all warned me about this one. I'm not even going to recap the story. Y'all seem to know what happens in it. So, let's dive right into the Fazbear Frights that has sparked such notoriety among the fan base. Firstly, I'm sure this is the first story that's gone meta. In like the first page, it references Five Nights at Freddy's as like an actual game series that exists in the book's universe. I don't know what that means for the Fazbear Frights as a whole, unless it really was just a fourth wall joke, especially considering that like a few paragraphs down, like the narrator talks about how being a game developer like isn't as fun as it's made out to be. Secondly, this is the first Fazbear Fright I think that has directly referenced FNAF Help Wanted. I mean, both feature an incarnation of Springtrap trying to break out of the game. That was kind of cool. Thirdly, the way the game talks about Springtrap is pretty self-aware. The character's backstory and personality are a true fan favorite, and it really seems like Scott went out of his way when he conceptualized Springtrap to make him a true horror icon. So when the story mentions about how Springtrap was supposed to be the next iconic slasher figure, on par with Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, it really seems like Scott was just expressing one of his private fantastical wishes in book form. Is Scott reaching out from the pages to talk to us? Should I take this as some form of divine intervention? I hope not, because based on what follows in this book, I don't think I want to know what's going on in Scott's mind. Fourthly, the protagonist, Matt, is just the world's biggest douchebag. He is pure cartoon. And the only reason he's that way is so that we don't feel bad for him when his fate comes to pass. And what exactly is that fate? The Springtrap in the game digitally transfers into Matt's body, impregnates him, turns him into some kind of Springtrap hybrid with yellow jaundiced skin, an appetite for raw meat, and 2 bumps on his head. His stomach distends noticeably. It's described like a watermelon. And in an act of desperation, the man takes a knife, cuts open his own stomach, rips the fetal Springtrap out of his guts, and as this man's lying on the floor, dying from blood loss, the baby Springtrap cradles his head in its lap and calls him Daddy. Let's break this down. One piece at a time. 1. We've seen this concept before, most notably in the Alien franchise. The thematic purpose for the xenomorphs impregnating human hosts, specifically men, was to present a sort of agonizing inversion on the joy of birth. The genesis of new life contrasted with the traumatic, violent, ugly death of the parent. And early in the story, it's revealed that the reason Matt broke up with his girlfriend was because she wanted kids, and he thought the idea of motherhood was unappealing and repulsive. His fate was ultimately poetic. So to say that this gory end for him just came right the hell out of nowhere, it'd be dishonest. Which leads me to 2. Unlike the Fazbear Frights, The xenomorphs' life cycles were heavily, thematically connected to the Alien saga as a whole. The corruption of life, the perversion of science, the overturning of motherhood, birth, and development. Fazbear Frights does not do any of this. So while this bizarre choice might make sense in context of the story, in terms of the Fazbear Frights and Five Nights at Freddy's as a whole, it is completely out of place and doesn't really add anything. And it also doesn't make sense. How the hell does a static electricity shock in a video game impregnate you with Springtrap? And we can file that away in first time a sentence has ever been said. I get that Five Nights at Freddy's isn't exactly famous for its logical consistency, but even compared to the Charlie bot, this is a stretch. And I know there's an irony in me postulating what does or doesn't belong in Five Nights at Freddy's, but this feels like borderline fetish material. Like the shit I did in Reimagining Security Breach, there was actually thematic purpose behind that. This? Well, let's just say I'm sure the FNAF inflation artists had a field day with this one. But yeah, while it seems I'm not as disgusted or affronted by this idea as most of you are, my issue is that it's a mediocre story and a very weird idea that was improperly implemented. No pun intended. Also, it's hilarious to me that the Kids' Choice Awards nominations just came out and the Fazbear Frights books are up for the win. Hey kids, when you're done reading about Captain Underpants' triumph over Wedgie Woman, check out the Fazbear Frights, where a man cuts open his own stomach to abort his fetal Springtrap baby. I can totally see how the story caused the stir it did. But considering the fact that it was already spoiled for me and that this isn't anything uniquely horrifying for me, admittedly, the effect was diminished. So overall, I don't care much for In the Flesh. Now let's move on to a different story, a more normal story. Yay! Arthur is a priest assigned to a patient in a hospice ward, one who has been horribly burned alive, but is being kept alive by a malevolent force. As paranormal happenings befall upon the hospital, conspiracies unfurl, and the patient starts to signal about what he wants and where he wants to go. Arthur's faith is tested as he considers exactly what to do with this man. A man who is considered by many pure evil. This story is probably the most conventionally scary of the Fazbear Frights so far, and it's also one of my favorites. I mean, really old-fashioned, Exorcist levels of scares. A real sense of menace and unease throughout. All the characters were really strong, even the side characters, that trio of nurses who plot their own different ways to kill the patient. They were my favorites. There's the mysterious spirit of a creepy little boy in an alligator mask, like a classic ghost story, and some really well done body horror associated with the patient. All good stuff and really jarring, especially compared to the previous two stories in this book. This mystery patient is 100% William Afton, and it's later revealed that the mysterious kid in the alligator mask is actually Andrew from the Stitch Wraith saga. I wonder what the deal with the alligator mask is. I think there was an alligator mask in FNAF 3. Is Andrew an expression of William Afton, or is he a separate entity? These Fazbear Frights are building up to something, and I'm trying my best to ignore the crap and focus on the gold. Now, what I'm about to discuss isn't really a criticism, more of an observation. And that's the way religion is handled in this story. Arthur is clearly a Christian priest, but it's never mentioned what denomination he is. God and Satan, their names are never invoked. The eternal struggle between the two is referred to only as the struggle between good and evil. The word hell is dropped a number of times, but it's the lowercase hell, which refers only to a generalized afterlife for the sinful, as opposed to the uppercase hell, which is explicitly Christian. Very deliberate choices, which is interesting, especially considering that Scott Cawthon is an open, devout Christian, and he has no doubt thought about how God and religion connect to the more spiritual, paranormal elements of Five Nights at Freddy's. There's one of two possibilities. Either Scott Cawthon deliberately avoided naming a specific religion in relation to the horrors of Five Nights at Freddy's, or the higher-ups of the publishing company said no to any references at all, presumably for similar reasons or to avoid isolating/offending readers. I guess it would have really been cool to see how a religious character's values clash with the horrors of Five Nights at Freddy's, but again, these are the Fazbear Frights. I'm not expecting much depth. So yeah, The Man in Room 1280, great story. Good old-fashioned horror, definitely one of my favorites. As for the Stitch Wraith, yeah, not much goes on in this one. We learn that the Stitch Wraith incorporates the Ella doll into its body. There's more dynamic between Jake and Andrew, and I just have a feeling that Jake and Andrew are going to clash in some way, and that's going to be the end of the Stitch Wraith, more or less, but that's just a theory, book theory, so I'll just have to keep reading and see. And that'll about do it. I think this one's the longest Fazbear Fright review yet, and there's a good reason why, so I'll see you all next time when I tackle Blackbird. Frickin' hawks screaming outside. Find a mate!